What's up, gang? Welcome to Room and Board. My name is Chris George, and today we are talking about the 5 reasons you shouldn't back Skyrim, the board game, a Room and Board original. And we're back with another one. What took you so long, Skyrim? I really expected this thing to be flying off the proverbial internet shelves, but it has taken a sizable length of time to get to that 1 million bar, which is the bar for this series. And for those of you who are new to this channel, well, don't worry, I'm actually a pretty nice guy. And I want you to have all the toys that you can play with. But I also like to fight against the FOMO that's often associated with these large campaigns. And make sure it doesn't sweep you up off your feet like Prince Hans in Frozen. And then down the line you regret it when your sister locks herself in a palace full of ice. So I am here to talk you down from your ice palace. Or to talk you into it, I guess. Because you know what? This also might be the game for you. And if it is, I hope you enjoy playing practically hundreds of hours of it. And for me, it does draw me in. It didn't at first, but it does after looking into it. The mechanics are fairly standard. Enter dungeons, encounter monsters, roll dice to see if you can smack them down without them smacking you. I also like that this one uses the mana and stamina tracks of Skyrim, and you can use those to do different attacks. So you could do a regular slash without stamina and deal 1 damage, or you could do a heavy slash and deal 2 damage, but you lose 1 of your stamina. I like this a lot. It feels very Skyrim. And what I also think is fantastic, at no point do you have to put everything back in the box and restart. And I think this is a huge boon to an adventure game. Or maybe not, depending on what you like. But because of the nature of these things, in terms of how the story evolves, and it is the story and exploration and living with your choices and seeing how the world shifts based upon those choices, well, getting to continue along in that story and not being forced to tear everything down, reset up the same setup, go talk to the same NPCs over and over again, just because you didn't do everything correctly or you failed that mission, this feels really refreshing to me. And I think it also increases the replayability because you are then going to want to go back and play this a second time. Maybe. You're going to want to go back and do those other things and make those different choices, and they're going to feel a little bit more fresh because the game didn't force you into going back and repeating that same 2-hour tutorial over and over again until you finally didn't die. This also feels like a solo game to me, which is strange because you'd think a board game version of Skyrim would feel like it would be optimal at higher player counts. But to me, I think just like Skyrim is best enjoyed by 1, I think I personally would probably best enjoy this game with just 1 person as well. Or at least make sure you're going to be playing with people who are willing to go at the same pace, because there are going to be a lot of narrative text and there's going to be a lot of different items and a lot of customization and gearing up and swapping your gear in and out. At least at the beginning of the game, where you get to choose from 12 common items to get your sort of starting build, that I think you're going to want to take your time with it. And I don't think it'll be as great an experience if you have someone who really wants to play quickly and you just kind of want to meander and explore the world. Because this sort of customization that it's currently presenting gets me excited. There are so many options to choose from, even just with your starting equipment. I really like that you have to choose your specialization and choose what sort of damage types you're going to get to do, even if realistically all the damage is basically the same. That doesn't matter as long as it feels different. It feels like, okay, I get to do dark damage or light damage, and I know there's going to be one monster down the line who will be able to defend that better than someone else. As long as it gives me the illusion of customization, well, that's really all you can ask for in a Skyrim game. Because really, that's all the video game really gave me, that sort of illusion. An axe and a sword really aren't that different when it comes down to it, but if they feel different, that's great. So there is a lot to like in this one. It seems like a fun vibe, and one that I'm sure a lot of Skyrim fans are going to savor. And you might be salivating, frothing at the mouth, like a sloppy dragon in heat after hearing the horn of the wind caller. That's what it was called, right? And I mean, we all know that was the real effect of the horn, too. But if you're on the fence about it, or even if you're not, if you think you're sure, here are some things to consider before you pull the trigger. So let's get into it. These are the 5 reasons you shouldn't back Skyrim, the board game. And reason number 5 is that it is a short campaign, especially compared to some narrative games that are out there that you could purchase for around the same price point. This is going to be a short one. They quote it as 90 to 180 minutes per chapter, But with the base game, you only get 6 chapters. Plus the expansion gives you 3 more if you're getting that deluxe version. So while they are quoting it on the main page as 27 hours for the deluxe version, remember the base game is likely to be 9 to 12 hours in the playthrough. On the lower end. I mean, they do say you can get more than that, yet thanks to a plethora of story choices, character options, and playstyles, there are practically hundreds of hours. I mean, you know what else has practically hundreds of hours with the same concept? Literally everything on the shelf behind me. Yeah, if you replay a game over and over, you can make it worth 100 hours or more. And I love how they say practically, which I'm guessing means the actual playtime without going down repetitive paths doesn't break that 200-hour level, or else they could say hundreds of hours. It's probably at like 190 if you math that out. I don't know, that's my bet. This is what the vagary of practically tells me, which is, in essence, nothing. But instead of focusing on the practically hundreds of hours, I think we do need to focus on the actual playtime. And while it is a short campaign, I think this is important to note, not because it's, man, it's not going to be as long or as good as something like Iridia. I mean, well, yeah, no, it's not. Come on, that game looks so good. But because of the shortness of the campaign, this is a game that wants you to play it again and to make those different choices and to see what happens. I really think the branching story paths will be a significant draw here because of the short length of the actual campaign. And that might be the main draw for you, and if that sounds exciting, great. But if you don't think you're likely to go back and customize your hero in a different way and try a different playstyle, but if you prefer your narrative games to be the one-and-done experience, which is totally fair and a lot of people feel this way, I'm personally usually of this mindset, then I think Skyrim the board game may not be for you. Now, reason number 4 you shouldn't back is that there are no good stretch goals currently for the base pledge, which honestly is a little dumb. When you spend over $100 for the base pledge, and that is their price point, it is over $100, it's $110 for the base pledge if you don't happen to get one of their 2011 $91 US base pledges. Although really they aren't necessarily flying off the shelves because this is GameFound, and so of course people are opting for the larger, more expensive tiers. We can't just get the base pledge like idiots. What are we, peasants? We're just running from town to town, hoping to not be killed, never exploring a single dungeon. Of course not. No, we are adventurers with both of our knees intact. Of course we need this deluxe gameplay pledge. Even though the minis are kind of basic and you could sub them with literally any other game that you probably already have that has better minis. But who cares about that? We're getting off on a tangent and that's not even one of our points. Lucky you, you get a bonus. But when you spend that much money, it's a bit of a slap in the face to only print off the extra 42 mini campaign cards for those who spend an extra $100 on the higher level pledges. And for you peasants who decided you wanted the 10th anniversary pledge and not the much more interestingly named gameplay pledge, well, screw you, you have to print off your own cards. So either these cards don't need to be cards in the first place, I mean more on that later on, spoiler alert, or you're stuck with crappy pieces of printed paper after spending $150 Canadian to get this game to your door, because that's what it would cost me, around $147. It's not great. And what is the markup on printing these extra 42 cards? Does it cost that much more? Certainly doesn't cost $100 more, I'll tell you that. So it doesn't feel great. And I think it alienates people from getting that lower priced pledge. And I think it's a dumb FOMO tactic to try to get people to spend more money. So if you just want the base pledge, you might as well wait until retail. So you don't have to pay the shipping and then just inevitably download those extra cards anyway, which clearly aren't necessary in the first place if you really want those extra side quests, which you probably won't even miss in the first place. I mean, as far as I can tell right now, and there still is a long way to go, there isn't anything in the stretch goals that's enticing me enough to consider purchasing it now. If you're opting for that base pledge, if you just want the base game, you just want a fun board game, one of them. Now, to be fair, they did say, I think in an update, that they are going to offer less PDF stretch goals moving forward because they recognize that people are unhappy with them, but That doesn't sound to me like you're retroactively going to turn the other PDFs into the physical versions that they should have been for everyone in the first place. Now, reason number 3 is if you've never played Skyrim. Or maybe this should actually be if you don't enjoy Skyrim. Because I played Skyrim. I played it a lot. I never finished the actual game though. I got caught up with the much more interesting side quests and became the leader of the Thieves Guild, and got so sneaky that I could run into the middle of a castle and crouch down in the middle of a field and nobody would notice me. Someone was swinging a sword at me, I just duck. I guess he must have wandered off. And then just... But Skyrim is a long game, and they're promoting this as a long game. I don't know if you've heard, if you get caught up with the side quests, it can be practically hundreds of hours long. But at its core, it is a game of meandering. And so if you're not into the lore and the world, it's just fine. The video game. But to some extent, the same can be said about the board game. That I got tired of it eventually. The video game. And it's actually my lack of enthusiasm for the video game that was propelling my lack of enthusiasm for the board game itself. I just get tired looking at it. I get a motion headache just thinking about it. But because of this emphasized narrative element, its focus is going to be taking the time together, if you're playing it with people, and fully participating in the story. Because the gameplay is pretty basic. You've got a big map, but basically it boils down to, where are all the wandering monsters on the board? Can I get there and kill them? Or should we all meet up at a level appropriate dungeon and kill some stuff before traveling however far we need to get to our next quest stage? And to me, this experience is quintessential Skyrim. Oh, I'm on my way to something, but here's a cave? Let's go in there. Swing my sword a bunch or roll my dice. See what the enemies drop, get experience to level up my next stat. And I think this game really does do a decent job in capturing that Skyrim experience. I just don't know if you will care about the world if you don't already. I do care about the world a bit, because when I was watching a couple of playthroughs in preparation for this video, I found myself thinking, oh yeah, especially with the soundtrack that was playing, this really captures Skyrim in a way that doesn't give me motion sickness. And it is that sort of Skyrim element that is pulling my focus into the game, not necessarily the mechanics of the game itself. Now, reason number 2 you shouldn't back Skyrim is that this is Juan Echenique, I'm probably mispronouncing that, the designer credited on Board Game Geek. This is his first design. Or at least his first design credit on BGG. I'm not sure if he's designed any other games. And honestly, this is a tough point for me because I like it when people get their big breaks. And oftentimes it's very exciting to bring someone new into a space. And this very well could be Juan's big break, and we could see him take over the board gaming sphere, and that would be fantastic. But on the other hand, I wanted to look back and see what he's done and how it's fared, and maybe we could draw some parallels in the thinking and the game design or game ideology, and unfortunately there is nothing to be found, or nothing that I have found currently. Write in the comments if there's a bunch of stuff that I've missed, if I missed an article or something detailing it, whatever. But my point here is you are taking a bit of a risk that this will prove to be too large a project for an unproven designer, and that sounds unfair. It does, but because we have nothing prior to base this off of, we then have to turn to Modifius Entertainment themselves, who also aren't really that well known for their board games. I mean, if you look into their history on Board Game Geek, none of their straight board games have broken into that 8 or above rating. But what is interesting, and I think is worthwhile to note, is that their RPGs do have those higher ratings. And they've done a lot of them, and a lot of them are fairly well received. And this gives me a lot of hope that these sort of narrative diverging pathways that they've got going on here and the narrative elements to this game are going to be satisfying. And it also makes me double down that it is the narrative element that should be the draw for this game. And the world will make or break the game, not necessarily the fighting mechanics. So in that regard, maybe the initial design matters less. But also just make sure you're fine with what you see and know that there won't be any more time to develop anything. Because they're basically planning on starting production right after the campaign is finished. There's not going to be a lot of time left for a pledge manager or a late pledge manager because they're going to ramp up production hoping to get it to you next summer, which is very ambitious and also is clearly that nothing about this game is going to change. And finally, the #1 reason why you shouldn't back Skyrim is that narrative card systems are a friggin' nightmare. And this is a very personal point for me. So maybe I should have put it sooner. But it is number one for me because my PTSD from playing Seventh Continent is very, very strong. Having to search through mounds of cards for every little bit of narration instead of just having an app or a book for all of these, and in turn lowering production costs for everyone, well, it just drives me crazy, really. And to some extent, I get why this one is all cards. I do. There are different things. You're going to have so many ongoing quests that you need the cards to remind you of what you're doing. You're going to be uncovering items and equipping them. I get all that. Plus, to tie it into an app would make all video game fans shudder as they relive their Diablo mobile horrors. It's better just to keep it analog. I get that. I get having a fully tactile experience, sure. But also you do have to keep in mind that there are no physical prototypes being circulated. This has been tested primarily online, or so it seems by all the demos and the promo material going around. And it is absolutely so much easier and effective to search through a bunch of cards when you can just right-click and bring up the one you want. It's so much easier to do it in digital than it is in real life. And I'm terrified that this is going to be really fiddly. Terrified. It keeps me up at night. Every time I look in a storm drain, which is one of my favorite pastimes no less, checking out storm drains and exploring abandoned houses, I am always fraught with visions of a card Rolodex jumping out at me, stalking me, watching my every move. To give you an example, Etherfields did most of their testing online, and they made their board ridiculously unintuitive. That would have been caught if the majority of blind testing was done in real life and not online. And yes, I mean real life, because there's one thing I've learned from the internet, it's that all your interactions on it are fake, fake, fake. And it's not real life, and I would never have been set up on so many blind dates with literal cats and fish by my friends in the real world, sexy hot yum yum 74. I trusted you with my social security number, and this is how you repay me. But so I am skeptical that it will be simple in the actual implementation. I imagine it will end up being pretty fiddly, and I imagine I will personally dislike it because of its fiddly nature. I'm too scarred, I admit it. And I hope that this isn't the case, but my back is already hurting thinking of me hunched over, searching through countless numbered cards over and over and over again, instead of playing the actual game, which in turn leads to the game not being pulled out as much if it's annoying to play. And also, speaking of design and cards, kind of a tangent, it is also a weird choice to have the text for a completed objective right below the initial text for searching out that quest objective on the same card. I mean, I'm happy it's on the same card because it means you won't have to search for another one, but you're gonna get this mission, there'll be a line of text saying what the mission is, and then there'll be a line with a number, and that number is the recommended level you should be at to attempt to complete this quest. And then right below that line is like the text for when you've arrived at that spot and have started to attempt to complete the quest. You're just not supposed to read under the line until you travel across the map to find out if that person you were searching is there or not. So in one of the playthroughs that I watched, you can see that the character has to go to Winterhold and search a house, and you're just supposed to not look at the bottom half of the card until you get there, which then tells you that the house is empty. I mean, an app could fix this. A book could fix this. A different card could fix this, or even just changing the design of the card could fix this. Having the objective requirements, which are at the bottom, what you're gonna have to roll and what you can use to mitigate that, swapped with the text of what happens when you go there or not. So at least when your eye glances down, you can see, okay, I'm gonna have to roll this thing, rather than, oh, here's the plot point that I have yet to uncover. I mean, again, like we talked about before, this likely will not change because of how soon they're heading into production. It might change, they might change some things based on community feedback, but I'd say that is a very, very slim chance. There's another bonus reason. Anyway, those are my 5 reasons you shouldn't back Skyrim the board game. That's where I'm currently at. How about you? How are you feeling about Skyrim? What do you think? Did I miss anything? Am I being overly harsh? Are my points not relevant? I'm always very interested to hear from you in the comments, and please share your thoughts if you're backing or you're not, because I'm sure everybody else who's contemplating backing Skyrim will love and appreciate your feedback as well in the comments below. It's great that we can collect and assemble a whole bunch of different viewpoints right in this one video for everybody to use as a resource. As for me, honestly, I know I've kind of gone in a little hard on Skyrim. For me, it seems really fun. It seems a lot more fun than what I was expecting it to be. I was really not drawn in by the look, the lack of information that was coming forward before the campaign started, but watching a few of the playthroughs, I really got a good sense of how the game plays, and I think that I would particularly enjoy playing it solo. It's just, I don't think I'm going to pay $150 to get the solo board game version of Skyrim when I could just play my old copy on the PS3 for free. It does look pretty decent though if you are looking for that narrative experience. So that's where I'm at. I'm probably not going to get it, but hey, maybe you can convince me in the comments to do it as well. Anyway, that's it for me. Thank you so much for watching. If you wouldn't mind, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't, because you won't even notice it, and it really helps me a ton, and I'd appreciate you forever. Once again, my name is Chris George. I don't have a catchphrase, but you know, I was planning on returning to my adventuring until one day I took an arrow to the throat, and I was never the same after that. Still alive, just walking around with it. It makes going through narrow doorways very, very burdensome. See you later.